Facing fear in recovery can feel totally overwhelming. When you're still using alcohol, it's easy to drink your way through what would be a scary situation. But in sobriety, facing fear means developing resiliency, building confidence and courage, and knowing how to face fear head on. In this episode, we explore how fear has affected us now that we're in recovery. We talk about what things make us afraid or anxious and why. We also share everything we've learned about moving through fear in ways that don't make us want to turn back to alcohol. Join us as we chat with Kenny, Corina, and Amber and share our insights and advice on dealing with fear in recovery.
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, but it's also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Steve and Julie. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full, there's no space left for alcohol.
One of the most important tools in doing anything that is scary is having support. Someone to share what you're feeling with, knowing they'll be nothing but supportive. If you're missing that kind of support in your life, we invite you to come check out our weekly Sober Happy Hour on Monday nights. It won't take long until you feel like part of the family, and you'll always find empathy, compassion, and support in our group. We meet on Zoom, and these meetings are free for anyone to attend. You can get all the information on our website at throughtheglassrecovery.com. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast. It is so nice to have all of our listeners here with us and these three wonderful guests. So we are going to do introductions before we dive into our Halloween episode. Kenny, I'm going to let you kick us off. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Kenny Hill. I run a private practice near Sacramento, California called Recovery Hill, and it focuses on one-on-one therapy. And yeah, I also I do interventions from time to time. And then I also have a podcast called the Patinaed Podcast, Patinaed with a D after patina podcast. And the whole kind of undertone or theme of that podcast is resiliency and having practical steps on how to build it from different guests. So pretty cool guests. It's kind of interesting. You get a podcast and really cool people want to talk to you or are willing to talk to you. It's pretty shocking. So yeah, that's me. 17 years clean and sober, coming up on here, and let's see, about 3 months will be 18 years. So yeah. And did I miss anything?
No, I think that's
Okay. All right.
awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, I hear you on, like, you start a podcast and all of a sudden you get to talk to all these amazing people, just like you guys. It's so cool, the people you get to meet when you decide to do this. So for sure, make sure you include a link to your podcast, and I will drop that in the show notes so our listeners can check that out too, because I think that resiliency is definitely something that people who are in recovery need to focus on and develop. So very cool. Well, thank you so much for being here. And next I'm going to go with Miss Corina. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to see you guys again.
Oh, it's great to see you too, Corina.
I'm Corina. I go by, because I met you both on the I Am Sober app. So my nickname on there is called Sea Change. A little play on words there. I like puns. I am 888 days sober today, 888, which I think is a great number. And I hope I never see this number again.
Mm-hmm.
And I am in just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia, and I am a teacher.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. Congrats on 888. Did you look up to see what that number symbolizes? I'm curious.
Oh, no, but I know that eights are really lucky in Chinese culture. And then I also know that in 21 years and 9 months, I will be celebrating 8,888.
So cool. I love it.
So,
That's the next time you have all eights.
yes, that's the next time I have all eight. So
All right.
I'm back in 21 years and 9 months.
We're going to have to be podcasting for a really long time. Let's hope that's still there in 21 years, then you have to be on somehow. At that point in time, it'll be virtual. We'll be all 3D and stuff, be dancing around, whatever. Never.
The callback would be incredible on that.
Right?
Right? Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming back, Corina. It's been a while, so it's just really nice to see you again.
Yes, too.
And of course, last but not least, we have Amber.
Hey everybody. So my name is Amber. I'm coming up on 3 years on Christmas Eve. 3 years sober at Christmas Eve. So I'll be just turning 34 months old when this episode airs, which is fun. I live in Grand Junction. Kind of. Yeah, I'm getting used to that. Clifton, Colorado, which is part of Grand Junction, Colorado. And I have only been here for a month. I moved here a month ago. I packed up everything and left everything I know and traveled in my 2005 Honda Accord with Jack, my Maine Coon, across country from the East Coast, from the Massachusetts area. So I'm working right now and about to looking into school, going back to school. Beer, great topic. But I actually officially submitted my application and I'm just waiting for things to happen. So yes, really excited about the future. And I'm happy to be here and be part of this. So
yeah, we are happy to have you here. It is super cool having Amber live in the same town as me and Steve. We actually get to hang out and stuff, which is so cool. We went bowling a few weeks ago and it was amazing. So yeah, really cool.
When you come into my work because your daughter works there as well, and I'm like,
right, yeah, you work with a kid.
Yeah, this was not on my radar. Even gosh, I get in June, for the meetup, and I just fell in love with it out here, and I had been looking for a change, and I was like, let's go.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, we're really happy to have you here. So yeah, thank you, all three of you. We'll dive into this topic. So since this is our Halloween episode, we thought it would be appropriate to talk a little bit about fear. Fear shows up in so many ways, and I don't want to limit the conversation. So I'm going to leave this wide open. One thing is for certain, though, no matter how fear shows up in your life, drinking it away isn't an option. So what fears come up for you now that you're in recovery? How do you deal with them? Or share a fear that you had in the past and how you worked through it and what you learned. The floor is wide open. Anybody can dive in as we all stare awkwardly at one another.
I'm making a whole bunch of hand gestures trying to be like, go.
It's I'll just say this, that I think for me, I guess I can only speak for me, but it's just when you've gone through so much, or when you're in recovery, there is so little that you realize is out there that you should be afraid. I mean, other than, okay, I'm afraid of heights maybe, or there's insecurity, there's nervousness, or, but actual fear, talk about resiliency. I think there's just something about recovery that allows you to confront your fear and do the thing anyway, whatever it is. So there aren't a lot of things that I used to actually, one of the first things I did when I started drinking was because, having social anxiety. And so, or if I had to do a presentation, there was something about having a little drink here and there that was going to calm my nerves. And of course, when you take that crutch away, now all of a sudden you gotta rely on yourself to figure it out and do the thing that you don't want to do and do it anyway. And I don't have the same kinds of fears that I used to have, or they don't knock me for six anymore.
And once you do the scary thing sober once, like public speaking, for instance, then you're like, oh, okay, I'm fine. I can do this. And for me, in most situations, I almost instantly gain confidence, and then it's no longer a scary thing. It's just the plow ahead and do the scary thing and just suck it up and deal with it. because then it's going to be easier the next time.
Yeah.
That was a really hard skill to learn. That if I faced the fear and did exactly what you said, Julie, suck it up and just do it, that it was going to be easier after. And then when I started sucking it up and doing it, because I got the reward of sucking it up and doing it, after I did it, then facing fear again the next time, I had an experience to draw off of.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I started this whole thing, I felt like I didn't have any experience to draw off of. Everything was just scary. Change. How was my life going to change? My friends, everything else, let alone all of the other stuff that cropped up, like fear of being alone.
Yeah.
Fear of, losing my job, fear of what are people going to think about me, fear, all of that stuff cropped up. And when I was
in recovery, people can't just be like it's not kosher to just give somebody the advice, just suck it up and do it.
No, it's not a generally accepted piece of advice for those people. No, and I'll finish with this, and I'll let some other people talk. But before we got here, I had some thoughts, and this kind of goes around with what Corina was saying right when she started out. Was I thought about healthy fears and unhealthy fears, and when I thought about a healthy fear, Corina, you mentioned like a fear of heights. I go hiking, and next to me it drops off really, really fast, and I'm walking on something that is 2 feet wide. That is a fear of my own mortality, like losing my own mortality. That is a healthy fear. That is trying to keep me alive in that moment. But I can still push through that. Whereas the unhealthy fear, when I look at that, it's, am I afraid to, me not wanting to read a book because I'm afraid that if I read the book, it's going to change my mind on things, and that's going to change my perspective. So I'm afraid of gaining a new perspective and that changing the one that I exist in that, like, I'm comfortable in it. Now that to me is unhealthy fear. I'm afraid to see a different side of things, but that might change my mind. And that's a fear I need to deal with. That's not my own mortality. That's literally a head game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot more of those, as you put it, unhealthy fears than we care to realize. I think probably most of them fall in line with this place where I think whatever the expectations that we put on ourselves, or we put on the perceived outcome of whatever the thing is that we're afraid of, can kind of, it's really about assumptions, right? And uncertainty and these types of things. So one of the things I was thinking about was like, well, what is fear? And like when I'm working with clients, I always tell them like the foundation for dysregulation is fear. So affect dysregulation would just be, irrational thoughts, impulsive thoughts, all the way to phobias, right? Which would be an extreme irrational fear towards something. So yeah, like kind of some of the things I was writing down is like what fear does is it triggers you to try to, like, your immediate reaction is to try to seek safety. Like, what can I find that's going to make me feel safe? Whether it's another human being, whether it's a substance, whether it's a group of human beings, like tribalism, escapism, defensiveness, and then even like it can trigger people into this hyper arousal state where they want to be aggressive towards another human being, right, as their kind of place of safety. But yeah, I think as it's already being talked about here, it's like fear can either induce like a worse version of yourself or a better version of yourself, and when you lean into whatever the small little fears or the discomforts are, the more you stack those up, then you begin to become more resilient. You stack them up and you do them. Maybe you start off super tiny with small little chores, And then all of a sudden you're waking up at a certain time every day, and then you're going to sleep at a certain time. And then you have this thing called discipline. And then you start leaning into these things where, yes, you're afraid of them, but you're like, well, I'm going to do it anyway, because if I don't, the voice in my head is going to be so much worse than like the thing I'm feeling right now. So I'm definitely going to follow through with this fear that I have type thing, right? And that just kind of builds up over a prolonged period of time. But another thing that I wanted to say was like, being nearly 18 years sober, it's kind of hard to connect with fear of early sobriety, even though, you know, I work with people on a regular basis with early sobriety. So I can resonate with it on some level, because there's things you could connect, like uncertainty and things like that. But like my fears now have changed, as C was saying, like my fears have changed to like my family and my kids. Like I have 4 kids under the age of 10. I'm like terrified for them, you know? So my fear is kind of altered from this kind of selfish state to this state of family and security in that way. But something that has been a good reminder, like I think what's pulled me back into really connecting with this, which is timely for this episode, is like I have a very close family member that just today we got him into treatment, just today. And like I said, I do interventions here and there when one comes along that feels right. But so I'm intervening for this family member and pulling all the strings and contacts that I have to try to cut some of the red tape and the bureaucracy and that county programming is cutting them from, and all this stuff. And I'm doing all this stuff. And I'm like my cortisol levels for the last 5 days have been through the roof. I'm just like my fear is just like, you know, he wants to get treatment. He's begging for treatment on 7 o'clock on a Friday. Everything's closed for the next few days. So I already know what he's going to do. He's going to back out several times in this process. And my job is to try to keep him reeled in and somehow keep him motivated to kind of do it. But because he's homeless and he's been suffering for years and years and years. And so his life is literally on the line here. And so, yeah, the fear over the last week or so of just trying to deal with that kind of pulled me back into the early times for me, you know, of just being like, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to do this. I hate myself. Never mind. Like, it's not even worth. And then finding all of these brilliant rational excuses, like, well, there's other people that can take it in front of me. They probably need it more. And all of a sudden, very humble and very moral compass driven rational reasons to avoid treatment so somebody else can get it in front of me, right? Like just ridiculous thought patterns. But anyway, yeah, that's my initial thoughts. I'll let somebody else talk.
And I mean, fear for me, I mean, I still face, I still face fears, you know, fears of like going back to school. I've gone twice, right? I've dropped out. I've quit on myself twice. And so, you know, fear of just moving across country. What I'm learning most about fear is that a majority of the fears I have aren't mine. And what I mean by that is like, even when I made the decision to move across country, right? There were others who were sort of imposing their fears, you know, as if it were them, like, well, what if this happens? And what if this happens? And what if this happens? And there was a brief moment there where I was like, oh, like maybe I'm being naive. Maybe I'm not thinking this through. Maybe I should wait. Maybe I should, you know, give it some more time and some more thought. And, you know, I was at the end of the day, I mean, just from everything I've learned, it didn't take me long to be like, those aren't my fears. Because in reality, I knew in my core that this was the right decision for me. And it was huge, right? And that alone should have made me afraid. But I actually had a girlfriend ask me, she's like, you know, you must be like freaking out, right? Like you're handling it really well, but like you must be freaking out. And I'm like, must I? why must I? Right? Because I'm not. Like, there was a calm because I knew it was the right choice. And but fear for me now is just a major indicator of something I'm unfamiliar with, something I haven't experienced, and something that I should experience, something that's important to my journey. And it's like, oh, I'm afraid of this thing, right? Okay, well, that means I have to do it then, clearly, right? It's like a new kind of chase. It's this chase of like understanding myself better. And I do that by pushing through those fears and just doing them. And every single time, there's not a single, decision I've made that had some fear around it that I could sit here and say, I wish I hadn't done that. And because it always, whether the outcome is, you're afraid of doing whatever the thing is, and you do the thing, whether or not the outcome of that is what you're sort of envisioning, whether or not that actually happens, it still ends up being this amazing experience, and something gets learned, something gets, added to my story. So yeah, fear is kind of just like my warning, not my warning signal, but my sort of my alert, right? My inner like, hey, we should do that because it's scary, and like we could learn something really cool about ourselves. So 'cause I've learned a lot about myself in the last month, and I keep learning every day. It's all foreign territory for me. So yeah.
Can I tie authenticity into fear? Because I like to tie authenticity
No way.
into every subject.
No way.
I'm just listening to you talk. And I'm thinking about some of my own situations too. And I think that the more we're really in touch with our authentic selves, the less likely we are to actually succumb to and let fear take the wheel, right? I'm thinking like social anxiety. I suffered from social anxiety so bad that like my heart would start racing if I sat down in a restaurant and the waitress came to take my order. That's how bad my social anxiety was. It's gone. And it's not gone for any reason other than that I have spent the last 3 years getting comfortable in my own skin. When you talk about how much we're influenced by other people when it comes to making decisions and change and all of that, like when you're so comfortable in yourself and you can you actually learn how to listen to your inner voice, then you're able to distinguish between, okay, that's theirs, here's where I'm at. And interestingly too, side note, we're also influenced by people who are super supportive. So if you've got one side over here that's like, you should be terrified, and you've got the other side over here who's like, yes, you're amazing, you totally got this. Like, we're influenced by both.
Yeah.
But no, I think authenticity plays a major part in most fear and how much it actually impacts our actions. We can still experience the fear, but I think we can be a lot more confident in our actions if we're confident in who we are and our values and our ability to really trust ourselves and know in our hearts what feels right, what feels safe, what feels wrong, all of that.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't have that 3 years ago. I think my major fear that I tackled by getting sober was my fear of being myself, because I didn't know how to be myself. I knew how to be what I needed to be for others, and the fear of losing others and, people wouldn't like me and all of those fears. And now I'm like, okay, well, the same stands true. Some people don't like me, the way that I am now. But it turns out now there's just room for other people to just come on in, right? That wouldn't have found me before because I wasn't being me. Mm-hmm. Like, I wasn't being myself. So yeah, now that I'm like, I'm not afraid to just be more and more every day, more myself, it gets easier and easier to sort of, because those fears are like, oh, like, no, this totally makes sense for me. This is something I need to do. This is something that makes sense for the new version of me, but didn't 3 years ago at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thinking, Corina.
What?
I said, what are you thinking?
Oh, well, I'm listening, and because it's I also had to move you, Julie, and Steve know about my big move, going from Egypt, where I was coming back to Canada to try and save a marriage that was doomed to fail, and had my 2 feral cats. And I was afraid. That was my big fear. And would my marriage survive? And that was a big fear. And, there were a lot of fears. And that's what I meant by, being able to when you get to the other side of it, you can go, I did that. I faced that head on, or face just full on. But one of the things that helped me too at that time was learning to, like, the physiological feeling of fear. You got the deep breath, your nerves are all tingly, your heart is racing. And the therapist, or my life coach, she's like, what else feels like that? And the flip side to fear is excitement. And if you can kind of channel excitement instead of feeling afraid, look, and that really helped me, because we taught. So I thought about, a fear of heights. I did a hot air balloon ride. And, so that feeling, being on this hot air balloon, and you're at the mercy of the pilot, right? And you just, and so it was in Turkey. So you're hoping that this person, is qualified and everything else. So that feeling of exhilaration, that feeling of, and then transfer that to, okay, you're going back to Canada, and you're gonna, to just channel that fear or that uncertainty into its excitement about possibility. Maybe your marriage isn't going to work out. And you know what? It didn't work out. And that's okay, because life turned out great anyway. And you speak to that too, Julie. It's like authenticity, trusting yourself, trusting that you're going to be okay. Even if you falter, even if coming to Canada and I spent the first 30 days on the couch drinking milkshakes and feeling sorry for myself, because I was sober through it, I turned out okay. Like knowing that you're going to be okay, I think is really empowering. And I think that's why, I moved again. I moved from my one city to a new city. I had to get a new job and everything else, and I had to reinvent myself again. And I don't feel as afraid. It's annoying, actually, because gotta get used to it. I gotta get my driver's license figured out, and and all these hassles, but I got another job. I have a great job now. And so, yeah, like, just knowing, trust yourself, be yourself, be good and comfortable in your own skin, like you were saying, Amber, as well as Julie. And you're gonna be okay. You are gonna be okay.
In the beginning, I remember that it was hard to believe that I was capable of anything more than I already was. And I didn't believe that that was much more than a really small list of things, even though I had a really good job with a lot of responsibility, because I didn't really believe in myself a whole heck of a lot. And over the course of time, and even especially early on, because fear was something that I recognized stopped me from doing the things I knew were good for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I came to this realization that if I turned around and I said to fear that you are going to be my friend, I'm going to make friends with fear. And instead of having it be something that I go and knock on the door and somebody says, boo, and I run away, I stay there. And I try and figure out what it is I need to still do, and then do it. And it led to me getting really, really frustrated with myself, because I would run away from the door. And my frustration level would get high enough, and my hurt level would get high enough that it was greater than running through the door. And so when I realized that, me and fear became more friends than we did enemies. And like you all kind of were talking about, it was an indicator of something that I needed to do, and it's something that I needed to face, and it was something that I needed to talk about. And as soon as I started talking about it, because I now believe a lot and Julie and Amber will attest for this, in the power of your own words. Julie, you know where I was going with this one.
Oh, yeah.
In the power of your own words. And as soon as I said to somebody, like, this is what I'm going to do, there's a level of innate accountability that shows up behind that, because I want to keep my word not only to somebody else, but I realized that it was me wanting to keep the word to myself. And I had to face the fear to keep my own word. And then I come to the point where I can actually trust and believe in myself again. And I'm at the point now where I have enough confidence that I can face the fear and I can bet on myself. I'm willing to take this risk because even though I know I have almost no idea what I'm doing, I'm capable of figuring it out. And that's what you were saying, Corina. Like, it doesn't matter if it happens or if it fails or if it doesn't work out. I'm still capable of figuring it out, and I'm going to be okay. I'm just going to be okay. It's really hard to start believing that if you jump, even take a small jump, that something on the other side of that is going to catch you. Because on the other side of all of that fear is a massive breath of fresh air.
I like what you said there, Steve, about talking about it. So you and I are very different. If Steve finds that he's afraid of something, he just charges straight ahead at it. And
I'm like a bull in a china shop.
Absolutely. And we are not the same. So I like to sit with my fear and let it like snowball into something completely out of control before I finally do something about it. But like just the other day, I was going through this kind of fear of rejection stuff that was in my head, and it snowballs, right? So if I just keep that fear in my head, then I start creating all of these stories, and I start like, in that case, I'm like, oh, this person thought this of me, and it's all nonsense that I just make up in my head. But as long as it's in my head, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's like this carousel I can't get off. And so I called Steve and I was like, hi, okay, I need to just talk this out. And as soon as I dumped all of the fears of really like rejection and fear of what people were thinking about me, and it all came out, I mean, he really didn't even have to say a lot because it just all came out. And then I was like, okay, so let's be more realistic and let's look at this from a rational sense. And then I just, sorted it all out. And I was like, good talk. But
period, end of story.
Absolutely, because as soon as you get it out of your head and put it into words, and a journal is great for that, but I think another human is even better. It just loses so much power. The fear loses power, and then it feels like something you can actually face or something you can just let go, depending.
Yeah, I think, Julie, so what you did was important, where, okay, sitting with yourself and processing something is that's important, but being able to take an action step forward and process it with another. And like you said, all of a sudden, Steve probably barely had to say anything other than just kind of make some agreement noises, and that's all he needed to do. But yeah, so I think the problem with being overwhelmed by things is we shut off the prefrontal cortex and we just stay in that place where the serotonergic system is being overran and we get stuck there. But when we can start to include the prefrontal cortex and start to go into some type of solution seeking, especially with another person, you can do it with yourself, but when you do it with somebody else and you actually hear verbally the concerns that you have inside of your head, there's something else that happens, and you start to go into this place where you have power. So yeah, that's huge.
Oh, talking about it is one of the things that I swear by. It's find someone to talk to. Like Julie said, like, journaling's great. It's good. It's a place to get it out. But if I share it with someone, there's an extra level of vulnerability that's involved in that. There's also risk. But if I share that with someone where I know I'm just going to be heard, then I can hear all of the things. And this is where it gets really important. When my brain, and I don't know what that mechanism is, but when my brain hears the things that I'm thinking, it registers it completely different than had I written it on paper. And so even if I write it on paper, I'll read it to someone so I can hear it. And then when I hear it, something fires off differently, and then I have a greater ability of seeing my own reflection and understanding where I was coming from in that moment, and then having a chance to do something about it. Because in the end, if there's something stopping me from doing what I want to do, that's fear. And it really drives me nuts now when I get in my own way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it drives me bonkers. Ask Julie.
Yeah, absolutely.
I get mad at myself pretty quickly.
It's so cool hearing everyone's take on this, and just like the self-awareness is so I think amazing. And I wonder if you, like, I know what I was like that many years ago when I started my sobriety journey and going through my garbage and whatever else. And I wonder if you hear it in yourselves, just like, this, oh, I have this tendency, but then I do that. Like, you have all these coping mechanisms, and you just kind of like run through this laundry list that you didn't have, I'm sure. So I love listening to it and hearing, just because, and also in that sharing, it's like, oh yeah, I should try that, like I'm going to do that next if I get that, that feeling again. I think it's wonderful that insight into how you manage stress or how you manage fear. It's really very, very encouraging.
I think
It's important too. It's important to recognize that, like, when you get sober, you're still gonna have fear, and sometimes it's gonna be irrational fear. It's not like you get sober and you start the process of recovery and suddenly you're not afraid of change, and you're not afraid of discomfort, and you're not afraid of whatever, irrational fears we have, or rational, either way. Fear doesn't go away. We just, as we move through it, we learn all of these different skills that you're talking about, Corina, because I think some people get frustrated when they get sober and they start this journey of recovery, and they still have all of these annoying feelings that are still throwing them for a loop. And they're like, wait, but I got sober. This isn't supposed to happen anymore. And so I think it's important to talk about stuff like this, because I think people need to realize you're always going to deal with fear or any other emotion. We just learn how to call it out, and then we learn what we're going to do with it.
Yeah.
It's the key, Julie, calling it out. Like, that's what I do now, because like, for instance, like, I can now say, not every time, but the things I've had to work on the most, I'll have moments where I'm like, oh, that I'm doing that thing, right? I'm doing this thing. I'm doing that I was filling out my application for college, and I literally out loud, all of a sudden, I said to Steve, because Steve was working on his laptop, I was doing stuff on mine. I was like, I'm procrastinating right now. I'm procrastinating hardcore. I have done everything but finish this application in the last 45 minutes. Like, it should not be taking me this long, because there's that level of fear, right? But I had to call myself out on it. I realized that I'm like, this application should be done. It's so simple. It's like 5 lines. Like, what am I doing? And then, of course, when I called myself out on it, it was like, okay, well, now you have to just do it, right? Get it done, hit send, and just be done with it. But yeah, that comes with practice. It comes with time, but calling it out it helps. You, like Steve said, you either hear it, if it's one thing if it's in your brain and it's just on paper, that's still just a connection with your brain. Once you say the words, like, I've literally called people and said, hey, I just need to process this right now. Can I just talk through this, right? Like Julie, it's like, I just need to get this out of my head right now. And as soon as I'll hear certain things, and I'm like, okay, all right, that's where we're going with this. So.
Right. And then you can be like, a good talk.
Yeah, it's fine. Thanks. Yeah.
What did you have, Kenny? You were about to say something.
Yeah.
I completely forgot. Okay. I mean, I literally, it's gone now. It's gone. I guess. Sorry.
That's okay. It's like me. I do the same thing.
The hazards of a group podcast.
Yeah,
it is.
Well, I heard my kids out here playing, and then I started thinking about that. Well, I hope this doesn't pick that up, and then gone. It's gone.
The squirrel.
Yeah. No problem.
You know what's funny? I did this episode with you guys a year ago.
Was it the same episode?
I just looked. I was like, this is like, I'm having deja vu.
That's funny. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I remember.
Halloween season.
Oh,
Do you feel like your relationship with fear is different now than it was a year ago?
Kenny, hang on to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I said, you guys pulled out this quote. Attitude is the difference between an ordeal and an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like you almost said the same thing, but in a different way earlier
Yep, absolutely.
with fear and excitement.
Mm-hmm. It's
Just
really interesting.
Oh, well, you're going to have to go back and listen to that episode and listen to this one after it comes out just so you can see what your differences are. I might do the same.
That's awesome.
All right,
Working.
what you got, Kenny?
Yeah, I can't remember. I heard someone speaking about how they're taking psychedelics. It was a ketamine and ibogaine treatment to remove fear, and they feel it had successfully worked for them. Like, they don't have fear. And the guy's like, don't worry. Like, I'm not going to go and like try jumping off a cliff because I don't have fear. I still have reasons I want to live and things like that. And even more so now. But yeah, fear is gone for me. And I thought to myself, how sad. Like, how sad that such a core function of the human condition is now gone. If it's true, if he's telling the truth, how sad. Yeah. Because it's like, I think, so fear can be, as we're talking about, such an overwhelming feeling, but it's definitely something that triggers motivation within us to it either triggers us to avoid completely, or it triggers a motivation to change the circumstance or to lean in or to do some type of behavior to fix the fear that you're feeling. And like, I think if I didn't have fear, it's scary, no pun intended, to think about like how I would be as a father or how I would be as a husband, because there's fears that I have that help keep me accountable in those roles, that help push me to be better and want to be a better father. Like, I noticed when my son came up and said something, I was busy, I pushed him off. Crap, I don't want him to I don't want that to scar him. I better go and make sure I go and talk to him, so that doesn't like linger around and he doesn't think he's not important or something.
Mm-hmm.
You rob yourself of the joy of being able to push through the fear. Like doing things that we're afraid of and then getting through it and getting on the other side. Like, that's a feeling I would not want to rob myself of, because that feels pretty kick-ass.
Absolutely.
It's one of the greatest rewards you ever give yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like running through that, walking through it, struggling through it.
Yeah.
All of my successes so far, let's just use sobriety, have come through fear. All of them.
Mm.
And yeah, I wouldn't want to give that up at all.
No.
You get a sense of self-confidence out of facing a fear that it's really hard to take away.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to take away that sense of self-confidence and self-worth when you see the other side of it.
Yeah.
I can. Right? When I turn I can't into I can, I feel good about myself.
Yeah.
I'll take that any day. That is a very, very cheap high. It's true.
Right? Right.
It is.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for me, like what you're talking about, Steve, is the aspect of like, that's growth, right? Like, life is going to give you plenty of opportunity for growth, and all of it's going to come in a way that doesn't feel easy. But yeah, I think that ability to be able to get past something that feels overwhelming and look at yourself, that pride that you feel, that is resiliency, right? Like, you just got better. You just got stronger at something. right? Like it's incredible. It's incredible. And the more you can do that in particular domains, the more you can, like, for me, it's about like the slogan I have for my clients is chasing failure. And that's where this is coming from, right? Like the idea of failure is so scary, I'm just going to avoid it. And I'm not going to talk about the neurobiology of this, but essentially the avoidance, it's a 48-hour contagion of more avoidance. For the next 48 hours, you're so overwhelmed with chemicals in your brain that everything feels impossible once you decide to avoid something. It's a 48-hour sentence you're giving yourself. So, but being able to normalize failure as this thing that you go and you get to chase and make it, it's still going to feel scary no matter what. Like, it's going to feel scary, but the more you chase it, the more, like you were saying, Corina, at the beginning, the more you get comfortable with this idea of, this is what I do now. I take on this thing that I'm scared of. And for a lot of people, it's the idea of failing at something or rejection, like you said, Julie.
Yeah.
Right. So being able to lean into that, whatever it may be, it could be something as totally like minuscule as doing a 5K race. Like it's not changing the world is what I mean by minuscule. It's not like, but for you, the idea of being able to do it, it changes so much for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
All right. So before I wrap this up, I'm going to tell a story about Kenny and how he influenced me.
Oh.
When you started this whole resilience thing, because I follow you on Instagram, and I don't hop on Instagram very much, but you pop up every once in a while. And you popped up early on in your journey after we first met you. And you started into this journey of resilience and running. And I think you went to go run a 50K or something like that. And you only made it 20 some odd K. And you said you failed. And I commented on your post. And your response was essentially, don't take that failure away from me. Because I softened it. And you said, no, it's a failure because I didn't reach the goal that I wanted to get to. And it made you do something different. I never forgot that response. That one response kind of lit a fire under my ass when people start avoiding failure. And I've been party to the other side of it because I've failed and I've had people minimize my failure. You didn't fail. You just didn't pass. I'm like,
that's what I tell my students. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm like,
I was there when he got the email that said, you didn't fail, you just didn't pass. And he was like, what the fuck is this?
I was angry. And I was like, how dare you pussyfoot around my fucking failure?
Yeah.
What does not pass mean? It means I failed.
Yeah.
So stop being soft about it. Stop making people more comfortable with the fact that it didn't work out for them so they can build that dang resilience that you talked about. So I never forgot about that. And like I said, it kind of lit fire under my ass. Now you can hear it. But anyways, that was your fault.
That makes me so happy.
That is
Seriously.
a great thing to be at fault for, Kenny.
Seriously,
Thank you so much.
it was. Like, I appreciated that more than I realized at the time. But it stuck with me, as you can tell. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for saying that. I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
Yeah, I think the reason why it's important for me to not, it feels placating, like when you earn a failure versus you just quit on, versus you don't, like you did nothing, you just rolled over, there was a challenge in front of you and you curled up in a fetal position and didn't even attempt. But it was something that I sought after. It was 100-miler, by the way, but who's counting? And I got it back, right? I got it back. Like, that was this thing where it's like, okay, what can I take from this? What can I learn from it? And I learned a lot in the experience of just training for it, but the failure taught me so stinking much. And I can't have that taken away from me. I earned that failure. I worked really hard for it, and I learned so much from it. And so the next time I went out, literally the things that I learned that's what got me through on the next one. The next one, when I completed the 100, I'm like, okay, like the tools that I learned from that last loss, from that last failure, is what got me through this experience. So yeah.
Well, and like, I know we need to wrap this up, but like, I can relate to that. So I do a long hike every summer. Nothing nearly as impressive as running 100 miles, but like, I was going to hike about 175 miles this summer. And my knee gave out about 110 miles in. And I pushed through it for a couple days, and it was getting worse and worse. And at that point I had to decide to call it because I didn't want to cause like lasting damage. And that felt like so much failure. I mean, I sat on the side of the trail and I cried for a good 20 minutes before I finally decided that I had to give up. But I would rather have that failure than never have even started and gotten the little bit of experience that I got. Like, I'd so much rather be able to say I started and failed than I never even tried.
It's brilliant.
I'm going to tie this right back into fear, because fear of failure is something that stops people from doing a lot of good things. Even small, really, really small good things. That stops us from getting sober because we fear failing getting sober. We count days. We go from 1 to 10 to 1 to 0 to 10 to 1 to 5. Every single one of those failures is another data point to get another 5 or to get another 10 or to finally get that 1,000.
Yeah.
And fear is what gets in the way of all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I'm going to wrap this up. So I want to say thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Corina. And thank you, Amber. This was an amazing conversation. I can't wait for everyone to hear this, and I hope our audience gets something out of this, because there's so many great perspectives here. It's just awesome. So thank you, guys. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you found this podcast helpful in your sobriety, please consider sharing it with someone you know that is also choosing to live alcohol-free. And of course, if you haven't subscribed or followed Through the Glass Recovery podcast, make sure you do so you don't miss future episodes every Monday.